Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because we're going to master something that is literally at the very core of a secure cloud environment, architecting trust within Google Cloud. By the end of this explainer, you're going to have a rock-solid understanding of Google Cloud's resource hierarchy, exactly how IAM role inheritance works, and how to apply this knowledge to fundamentally lock down your own environments.
Okay, let's dive into this top-down architectural tour. First, the blast radius threat. Second, the IAM equation. Third, the macro view of hierarchy. Fourth, the cascade of inheritance. Fifth, role types. And finally, the golden rule.
Section 1. The blast radius threat, establishing the stakes.
So I want to start by posing a question that should immediately set off alarm bells for any cloud engineer. Think about it. Do your interns, your developers, your DBAs, and your architects all need the exact same permissions? I mean, absolutely not, right? It sounds completely absurd when you actually say it out loud. Yet, in so many environments, this kind of blanket access is just unintentionally handed out, and it exponentially multiplies your risk overnight.
When everyone shares identical, really broad permissions, you basically end up with this massive tangled web. In a scenario like that, a single compromised credential, let's say an intern's account gets breached, suddenly exposes your entire cloud footprint. It allows an attacker to just easily hop laterally right over to production databases and sensitive storage buckets. The blast radius is just absolutely catastrophic. Now, contrast that with our actual goal here. By defining really strict IAM boundaries, we're basically assuming a breach is going to happen, but we architect our security to trap that compromise in a tiny isolated box. It completely starves the attacker of any lateral movement.
Moving on to Section 2, the IAM equation, the mechanics of access. So, Identity and Access Management, or IAM, is what dictates exactly who can touch what resources in Google Cloud. But here's the real secret to mastering it. IAM isn't just a simple on-off switch, it's an evaluative formula. That formula is identity plus role equals permissions. You literally never just hand an identity raw access. You always combine an identity with a role to grant highly specific, scoped permissions.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that formula works in practice. I absolutely love this physical key metaphor. Think of the identity, which, could be a human user, a service account for an app, or a Google group, as the blank key itself. It just answers the question, who is asking? The role is the specific cut or shape of that key. It's a named bundle of permissions that answers, what can they do? And finally, the permission is the atomic action, like spinning up a compute instance. That is the specific lock the key is trying to turn. You manage access exclusively by binding validated identities to properly scoped roles.
All right, Section 3. The macro view of hierarchy, the blueprint.
So here is your overarching blueprint. Google Cloud organizes everything into a very rigid hierarchy. Right up at the very top, you have your entire organization. Inside the organization, you've got your folders. Down inside those folders, you have your projects. And finally, inside the projects, you get to your actual individual resources, like your VMs or databases. And those IAM policy bindings, you actually attach them directly to these specific nodes. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that you must map your GCP folders and projects strictly to your organization's real-world risk boundaries.
Let's move to Section 4, the cascade of inheritance, top to bottom flow. Let's see how this built, because in Google Cloud, permissions inherit strictly downward. It's basically like gravity. Notice how an IAM policy applied at a higher level, like the organization level way up top, automatically cascades like a waterfall to all the children below it. The folders, the projects, the resources, all of them. Because of this, you literally cannot use a lower-level policy to restrict access that you already granted at a higher level. This makes organization-level grants highly toxic if they're too broad. You really have to push your IAM bindings as far down the hierarchy, down to the project or resource level, as functionally possible.
Okay, Section 5. The locks, role types.
So, zooming in, we basically have three main types of roles to pick from. Basic, also known as primitive roles, offer exactly zero granularity. They pack thousands of permissions into these massive buckets, representing a critical risk. Then you have predefined roles. These are managed by Google, they give you high service-specific granularity, and they are highly recommended. And lastly, custom roles. These offer absolute granularity because you define them yourself, but they require a ton of high manual maintenance, making them ideal pretty much only for strict regulatory compliance.
You really can't miss the stark warnings around basic roles. Viewer, editor, Owner. These are legacy primitive roles, and they are just dangerously massive. Like granting someone editor across a project gives them thousands of permissions they likely never even use. Your security takeaway here is super clear. Deprecate basic roles entirely in production, just get rid of all generic owner and editor roles. Standardize on the predefined granular roles that Google actively maintains, and only use custom roles when absolute precision truly justifies all that heavy maintenance overhead.
Finally, Section 6, the Golden Rule, bringing it all together.
So, the crucial point is this, the principle of least privilege. You have to grant only the specific permissions required to perform a specific task, and your default should always be deny. That broad access approach is just a nightmare of lazy provisioning, literally dumping generic keys and permanent standing privileges across your environment. Now consider the narrow access approach. This is where we want to be. A highly scoped, ultra-secure pipeline utilizing temporary just-in-time or JIT elevation. You bring a single verified request in, elevate their privileges only for the exact amount of time needed to do the task, and then boom, you strip those permissions away immediately.
I really want to highlight this incredibly powerful quote straight from our source material. Security is an active engineering discipline. Standing privileges are a liability. You can't just set an IAM policy on day one and walk away. As a cloud engineer or architect, you have to actively monitor your audit logs, implement access transparency, and literally strip over-provisioned access from your environment based on actual real-world usage. If a user or an app has a standing privilege 24/7 that they only touch once a month, that is a massive, completely unnecessary vulnerability just waiting to be exploited.
I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought. Think about your own Google Cloud environment right this very second. Do you know exactly who holds the generic owner role? Are there intern accounts, legacy service apps, or maybe external contractors who have standing, permanent access inherited all the way from the top of the organization level? Because if you don't know the exact answer to this right now, your blast radius might already be uncontained. Go run an IAM recommender audit today. Find those primitive roles and lock them down for good. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy architecting!